Honestly, I don't know if there was a more impressive one-year turnaround than what we just saw at Northwestern. The Wildcats don't exactly usually have a ton of talent on the roster, and over the last decade or so, the program was run really well by head coach Pat Fitzgerald. Despite them being awful the previous few years and them losing Fitzgerald this summer, Northwestern still made a bowl game this year, had a couple of good wins, and now have a decent amount of momentum going into the future. Their interim head coach David Braun is now the full-time head coach, and with a new stadium and a ton of resources being poured into the program, Northwestern football is in a good spot to hopefully one day develop into a top-tier program, and maybe one day compete for the college football playoff. Yes, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here, but in today's video, I want to talk about the impressive rebuild that David Braun pulled off this past fall. We're going to go through how Northwestern got so bad in the first place, the whole situation with Pat Fitzgerald, how they did so well this past fall, and then my thoughts on them going into the future. But before we get started, if you're a big college football fan, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, coach, or situation I can cover next. Now let's get started and talk about the one-year rebuild of Northwestern football. By no means is Northwestern a historically good program, but they are in the Big Ten and have had their moments. Those moments especially happened during the Pat Fitzgerald era. In 2006, Fitzgerald became the head coach of the Wildcats, and while he did struggle at first, he had a breakthrough in 2008, in which the Wildcats went 9-4 before losing in the Alamo Bowl. That was the first of 5 straight bowl appearances, and in 2012 they got their first 10-win season and were as highly ranked as number 16 in the country. In 2013 and 14 they missed a bowl game both years, but he would bounce back in a big way and lead Northwestern to its most successful stretch in modern football. They went 10-3 in 2015, 7-6 in 2016, 10-3 in 2017, and then 9-5 in 2018. During that time, they won 3 of 4 bowl games, and we saw the emergence of one of the best quarterbacks in school history, Clayton Thorson. They had a ton of really good players, and Northwestern was starting to be consistent. After one bad year in 2019, Fitzgerald's Wildcats would bounce back in a huge way in 2020, winning the Big Ten West and going to the Big Ten Championship against Ohio State, and they were ranked as high as number 10. They also won the Citrus Bowl, and Northwestern football was really looking like it was in great shape. Unfortunately, this is where the downfall begins though. In 2021, the Wildcats went 3-9, and then in 2022, the Wildcats went 1-11. Both years they went 1-8 in conference play, and they suffered some pretty awful losses. I remember in 2022, they lost at home to Southern Illinois, and for the most part, they were not competitive at all. Why was that? Well, one, they did not have a quarterback, as they went through a ton of different guys, and no one seemingly could get anything going. The defense struggled, and there just didn't seem to be many weapons or offensive playmakers. There was a total disconnect, and now there are some who are wondering if the man who was leading the charge up top is partially to blame for that. This past summer, we saw allegations come up against Coach Fitzgerald. It talked about player mistreatment, player hazing, and overall a lack of accountability coming from the top. I guess there was some stuff that happened behind the scenes, and while there are rumors that a lot of it was overblown, things did happen and Pat Fitzgerald was eventually outed as the head man. Say what you want about it, this was a big blow to Northwestern. Fitzgerald was the best coach in school history and had brought them the success in the modern time. But he was not qualified to be the head coach anymore, and while he has been fighting against the school, Northwestern had no choice but to move into a new direction. Who would they end up going with? Well, they would promote David Braun to head coach. He had literally never coached at the FBS level before, as he had spent all his time in the FCS, and Braun was just brought into the Northwestern program just a few months earlier. It was a tall task for Braun, as the team had literally just gone 1-11 and seemingly had no talent on the roster, and there was no way that he was going to succeed. Everyone predicted Northwestern to finish 14th in the Big Ten, and I definitely thought they were going to be a laughingstock and they would struggle to even win 1 or 2 games. Braun was named the head man just 4 days after Fitzgerald was fired, and their AD Derek Gregg said, quote, "Upon his arrival at Northwestern, I quickly identified that Coach Braun identifies the values of our athletic department. He has respect, integrity, service, and excellence." While to some it just felt like sweet talk, I guess there was truth to what he was saying, as Braun would lead, in my opinion, the most unbelievable turnaround of the 2023 college football season. But who even is Braun? Well, he grew up near Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and had never been a college head coach or even worked at the FBS level, as I said. Fitzgerald would hire him away from North Dakota State, where he had spent the previous 4 years as a defensive coordinator for the Bison. Everyone knows that North Dakota State is a juggernaut at the FCS level, so this was an underrated hire. He ended up playing his football at Winona State, and he also spent time at UC Davis in Northern Iowa before he joined the North Dakota State staff in 2019. Other big names that come out of North Dakota State include Wyoming head coach Craig Bohl and Kansas State head coach Chris Kleiman. This would now be the third guy who'd get a chance to be a head coach from North Dakota State at the FBS level, so how is he going to end up doing? Well, let's first take a look at the roster he inherited. So at quarterback, you had 3 guys fighting for the job: Ben Bryant, Brendan Sullivan, and Ryan Helinski. Ryan Helinski had the most potential, as he was a huge recruit in the 2019 class, but he had been very disappointing to this point. Brendan Sullivan had been a reliable backup, and they had brought in Ben Bryant from Cincinnati to be the starter right away. While Bryant wasn't exactly the greatest quarterback in the world, he did have a lot of experience in leadership, and he would end up leading the team in passing, as he threw for 1,800 yards with 13 touchdowns and 6 picks. By no means were those all conference numbers, but Bryant did exactly what he was asked, and seemingly led the team to plenty of wins. At running back, they had a couple of decent options, as he returned Cam Porter, who was a huge deal during the 2020 season, and he ended up running for 651 yards and 4 touchdowns. In terms of guys to throw the ball to, you brought in 2 transfers in Cam Johnson and AJ Henning, as Johnson spent time at both Arizona State and Vanderbilt, and Henning was a big recruit from Michigan. They also returned Bryce Kurtz, who had been on the roster for the last few years, and those 3 combined were an excellent trio for Northwestern. Johnson had 54 catches for 715 yards and 6 touchdowns, Kurtz had 49 catches for 700 yards and 5 touchdowns, and Henning had 45 catches for 418 yards and 4 touchdowns. All 3 of those guys combined to be great playmakers, and that was something that Northwestern really lacked over the last few years. So now they had a strong, experienced leader at quarterback, 3 good playmakers, and a really good running back who also had a ton of experience. In terms of the defense, you had 2 guys who had over 100 tackles, as both linebackers Bryce Gallagher and Xander Mueller really took charge of the defense. Mueller even had 5 sacks this past season, and overall, that was going to be Braun's specialty, as he coached defenses the last few years. Northwestern's defense was terrific, and they improved a ton this past season. That sets the stage for the season, but still, everyone picked Northwestern to finish 14th in the conference, including myself, and there was no reason to think they could be competitive at all. How did they end up doing? Well, let's take a look. In week 1, Northwestern would have to go on the road for their first game, as they would play against Rutgers. Rutgers ended up having a decent season as well, but they got blown out 24-7, and right away, many were very concerned with Northwestern. This is exactly how the season was going to go, and many were not happy with it. But in week 2, they showed some promise, as they came home and beat UTEP 38-7. Except the Miners aren't exactly the best program in the world, so many weren't really putting much stock into that one either. After that, they'd have to go on the road to play against number 21 Duke, and in that game they also got blown out 38-14. It seemed that Northwestern was probably destined for a 2-3 win season at this point, but then the switch would just flip. The following week they would host Minnesota at home, and in this game, they were super competitive. The game ended up going to overtime, and they actually beat Minnesota 37-34, and Ben Bryant had nearly 400 yards passing, and Bryce Kurtz had over 200 yards receiving. It was insane, and now Northwestern got their first signature win of the Braun era. They were 2-2. After that, they would host number 6 Penn State and get blown out 41-13. Pretty much everyone expected that, but now Northwestern would continue to turn it on. They took care of Howard at home on October 7th, and then lost a close one on the road in Nebraska. The problem with Northwestern to this point is that they were too consistent. They'd win one and lose one. They did not go away from that trend for the first 2/3 of the season, but then they would finally finish the season strong. At the end of October, they would host Maryland, who at the time was really good, and in that game, they pulled off an upset. They won 33-27 over the Terrapins, and now at 4-4, they had a legit shot of going to a bowl game. From there, they would play against Iowa, and in a typical Iowa game, they would end up losing 10-7. The Wildcats were now 4-5, and would have to win 2 out of their last 3 if they wanted to make a bowl game. Luckily, the 3 teams they were playing at the time were struggling. Wisconsin had just gone on a losing streak, Purdue was the worst team in the West, and Illinois was the second worst team in the West. In that first one, they'd have to go to Camp Randall to play against Wisconsin, and they pulled off a stunning upset. They ended up beating the Badgers 24-10, and while this felt like a horrible loss for Wisconsin, it was a big-time win for Northwestern. They are now 5-5, and then they'd have a chance to clinch bowl eligibility the following Saturday against Purdue. In a game I was personally at, I watched Northwestern have like 5 takeaways, and they ended up winning 23-15 over Purdue, and everyone was pumped. At least the people who were there. There were pretty much no fans in the stands. Honestly, it seemed no one really cared, but Northwestern had just pulled off an unbelievable achievement. They were now 6-5 and had made a bowl game in year 1. To finish out the season, they'd go win a thriller on the road against Illinois, as they'd win that one 45-43, and Northwestern would finish the regular season at 7-5 with a 5-4 mark in the Big Ten West. This was good for second in the division, and this was actually truly unbelievable. After starting out the season really slow and looking dead in the water, they ended up going 7-5. They go to the Las Vegas Bowl, where in that one they would beat Utah 14-7. Not only did Northwestern make a bowl, but they won a bowl game over a team that was supposedly really good. To finish the year, the Wildcats went 8-5, and David Braun was on fire. He became the first Northwestern coach to win 5 games in his first season since 1903, and he had won more games in that season than the past 2 combined. The defensive unit improved substantially, as they went from 82nd to 46th in points allowed, and 62nd to 29th in yards allowed. In terms of when he finally got steamed to be the head man, it came after their win against Wisconsin. The players took to social media and posted the hashtag #RemoveTheTag. Even Pat Fitzgerald's son posted that, and that's when everyone knew that he was going to be the head guy. On November 13th, Northwestern would officially make David Braun the permanent head coach, and Braun would say, quote, "I am truly honored for the opportunity to continue leading Northwestern's football program. Over the past 5 months, having the chance to lead this group has been the opportunity of a lifetime. Moving forward, my mission is to build on this positive momentum, aiming to create one of the best experiences in college football for our student athletes." When they took the interim tag off, many were excited, but also the national media was not excited for this. When Stuart Mandel gave his grades for coaching hires, he gave Northwestern a C+. He said, quote, "This hire proved that the athletic director could not convince an established Power 5 head coach to go to a Big Ten program with deep pockets and modest expectations. One Northwestern alum said it was a short-sighted move, and that Braun achieved everything with someone else's roster and staff." Apparently at the time, the Wildcats were in the midst of an extensive coaching search, which had 12 candidates. But after Braun had success in the field, and did really well in his interview, they made him the obvious choice. Some think it was a dumb hire, but he should be able to work Northwestern into a big-time program eventually. Even with its high academic standards, Northwestern has a very strong pitch. They have a $270 million practice facility, and now they're coming up with an $800 million new stadium. They're also part of the Big Ten, which is now one of the 2 premier conferences in the nation, and they're going to be playing against great competition. You get good academics, and they'll be playing in a lot of big-time games against a ton of big-time programs. In my opinion, Braun is definitely the guy for the job, as I don't really care that it was someone else's players. These players had won a combined 4 games, and there was little to no talent on the roster. He ended up turning that into a bowl-winning caliber team, and more importantly, seemingly saved the culture after the disastrous outing of Pat Fitzgerald. That, in my opinion, is exactly what a coach should do, but the biggest knock I have on Braun is how is he going to make the team good, as his recruiting right now is absolutely awful. Northwestern's high school class for 2024 ranked 97th in the nation, and their transfer class was 130th in the nation. They signed a 3-star and a 0-star transfer. No offense, but that may not get the job done in today's college football climate, but at the same time, I have to give Braun the benefit of the doubt. I don't think any of the guys on the roster were really that highly regarded, or were seen as blue chip players, so I think we just have to trust the process when it comes to Braun. Next year, I believe they return both Cam Porter and AJ Henning, but my question is, who throws them the ball? I've been looking around a ton and cannot seem to find much information on next year's team, as I don't know who has eligibility and who doesn't, but I think Ryan Helinski has 1 more year left, and if so, he's really going to have to develop and get better. He has been awful the last few years, and after a brief short stint of success at South Carolina, he has gone down as one of the more disappointing quarterbacks from the class of 2019. But he does have potential. Cam Porter and AJ Henning are both terrific weapons, and we're definitely going to need to see guys step up. Another thing Braun's going to have to get over is the fact that he's no longer going to be a surprise. Northwestern isn't going to be expected to win 1 or 2 games, and now that he set the bar high, he's going to be expected to improve on that or hit that bar every year. We'll really have to just wait and see what happens, but in my opinion, the Northwestern David Braun rebuild was the most underrated in college football last year. I don't think people realize how bad Northwestern's roster and situation was, and the fact he won 8 games in a bowl game in year 1 is truly mind-boggling. While some will argue it was with someone else's players and in the worst division in college football last year, it's still impressive, and the future does look seemingly bright for Northwestern, so wait and see. But what do you guys think? If you're Northwestern or just a college football fan in general, What do you think of David Braun and the Northwestern rebuild? What's another team, player, coach, or rebuild I should look at next? And before you go, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and check out all my other videos on the end screen. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.